Okay, we'll finish up Lab 1 Intermediate Excel here with video 3. Last time we ended by summing the net income for 2010. Remember, we did that by using the sum formula, and in this case we had previously created a named range using the name manager for the 2010 US dollar net income, which we labeled Y10. Okay, we ran into a little problem here, which is when we tried to copy and drag our formula for US dollars over to euros, we actually got the same exact number, and the reason is because our named range was copied with the formula, and remember that named range Y10 is locked to this range of cells here. So we don't actually want that in there. Instead, what we want is D132 through D143, which is actually the range for euros. If we hit enter, we see now we have the correct figure in euros. So when you are creating name ranges, remember that they can be a useful tool, but also remember that they can occasionally create some problems if you're trying to copy formulas over to new cells. So just be aware of that issue. Okay, so let's finish with these last few, and we'll go as quickly as possible. Next thing we want to do is the yearly and monthly average for the euros, and that's going to be on net income. So that'll be at the top, the yearly and the monthly averages for net income. Okay, so we can do this in two ways. First, we'll find the average yearly income in euros, and we'll do this with the sum feature. Okay, in this case, remember the average is the total for all 10 years divided by the number of years, which is 10. So we'll sum all 10 years, the average, or the total for each year, and then we'll divide by the total number of years, which is 10. Okay, so we're just going to do what we did last time, which is sum and add the subtotals for each year. Okay, so we've done that. We've got a sum now for each year, and we have 10 years, 2001 through 2010, so we're going to divide by 10. We could also create somewhere up here something that said number of years and create a formula that automatically pulled the number 10 for us. And that might be a safer way to code this in case in the future we wanted to add more years. We wouldn't have to go in here and change this number from 10 to, say, 11 or 12. But in this case, we'll just leave it at 10. And that's going to give us our average yearly net income in euros. Okay, next we want to do monthly average. And we'll do that a little differently, okay? Rather than do sum and divide, we'll use the average function. Okay, and so if you type in average, you've got a little helper here that will start to give up or bring up formulas that is suggested. And you can kind of see what each of those formulas does. So in this case, we're looking for something to return an average. So we'll type that in. And once we get our parentheses afterwards, it's going to sort of give us what we need to include. So it's just a range of numbers, okay? And in this case, what we'll actually do is we'll select the full range of months, so January for December, in euros for each year from 2001 to 2010. Okay, so I'm actually going to select, instead of one number, a range, and I'm going to divide these ranges with commas. Okay, I'm not adding them. The average function is going to average and divide them on its own. So what I want to do is just go through and select all of the ranges. I'm adding my comma each time. Okay. So it takes a little bit of time, but much easier than doing it individually, okay? And so when we average those ranges of 12 months for each of the 10 years, it will give us our average monthly net income from 2001 through 2010. Okay, so we've completed the average yearly and average monthly income in euros, so we'll complete that. Next, we're just going to look at two functions that are really simplistic, but can occasionally be helpful when you're calculating dates and other things. So first we'll start with adding today's date using the today formula in cell H3 on net income. Right, so this is a simple formula. You just kind of do equals, and then we type in today. You'll see it's going to give us a description. It's going to return the current date formatted as a date. So we are just going to leave open parentheses there, hit enter, and it will actually give us today's date. I am recording this video on Thursday, September 13th. Okay, so kind of a simple, handy thing. And when the date becomes tomorrow, it will actually show September 14th there. So that function is going to update automatically the date every day. Okay. Next, we want to add today's date using the date formula. Okay, so this actually allows you to enter a date that is going to stay set. So you don't have to worry about it changing every day as things change. So in this case, we'll just enter today's date, and we'll list this as January 11th or January 29th, 2011, and we'll just treat it as that, as if it were the first month after we've compiled all this data. So 2010 has just been completed, and we're in January 2011, and we're looking at our budget. Oh, so that didn't work. So what do we need to do? Okay, what we did wrong is we just actually formatted this wrong. So it told us year, month, day. We don't want to actually type in the name of the day. We'll just type in the number for the day. And we see if we do that, then it will correctly give us the date, right? 1/29/2011. Great. Next, we want to calculate the daily averages using dates for the euro. Okay, so the daily average using these dates for the euro. Okay, so to calculate the daily average, the first thing we're going to do is we know that the daily average over the 10 years is going to have to include right, the sum of the euro over the 10 years, which we've already calculated. So we're going to have to use this number, right? And we need to divide that by the total number of days over these 10 years. And the easiest way to do that, as you can see here, we've created a data. We've organized our spreadsheet so that we have the period that was beginning January 1st, 2001, which is the first month for which we have net income. And it goes all the way to December 31st, 2010, which is the last date when we have income. Okay, and these are entered as dates, right? So what we'll do is we'll just write a simple formula that says takes the total net income over the 10 years, which is cell D146, and then we're going to divide it by our end date minus our beginning date, or I'm sorry, our beginning date minus our end date. And we want to make sure, because of order of operations, that we do this in parentheses. So we're going to say starting January, or I'm sorry, that's not where we want to start, ending December 10th, 2000, or December 31st, 2010, minus all the days back until January 1st, 2001. And if we get that, we should get a figure for the average daily net income, which is, looks like it's about 180 euros. And we can always reduce the number of decimals there by using these two buttons. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is to calculate the number of months where net income was negative for euros. Right, so we want to see, well, how many months did we actually not have a positive balance sheet? And so you'll notice throughout this that we've already given you formulas in US dollars, so it's pretty easy just to, you could technically copy and paste this over. However, it's not always going to work exactly the way we want it to, although in this case it does. Negative is negative. But let's just briefly talk about what this is instead of copying and paste it over. So we're going to use a formula called COUNTIF. And what that's going to do is it's just going to count anything that meets the criteria we've specified. Okay? And so we want the number of months where we had no, or we had a negative net income. So what we can do is we can actually highlight the range in euros. And we don't need to worry about highlighting the summary cells because if they're negative, then none of them are negative actually, so we don't have to worry about those. Right? And the condition that we're looking for, the criteria, as Excel calls it, is anything that's basically negative, so anything that's less than 0. Right? And so we want to count all the months within this range that meet the criteria of being less than 0 or no net income. Right? And it's the case clearly that it's 27. So if there's a negative net income in US dollars, there will also be one in euros. Okay, so we know how many months the net income was negative in euros, but we don't know by how much it was negative. So the next thing we're going to do is say, well, how much were we below 0? So we're going to calculate the average monthly loss over the 10 years in US dollars and euros. In this case, we haven't given you the equation. We want you to come up with it on your own. And so a handy equation here is an average if equation. Okay, so again, we want the average loss, but we only want it when the net income is negative. Right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to say average if, and in this case it's US dollars. So we're going to select each of the months, right, in US dollars, right, all the way down to 2010. We're going to say, so average any of the values, the monthly values, if they are, again, less than 0. Okay? And what we get there is a negative value. Again, we might want to make this look a little better. We can actually use Control F1 and say, I want it to look like this. I want negative numbers to appear in parentheses. And I also want this to fit a counting format, just like my others. So we'll do that. Right, and this time, since we came up with the formula on our own, we'll just go ahead and copy that over. We note that it did change our column reference from C to D, since we didn't have it locked. So we know the average monthly loss over the 10 years was about 6,300 US dollars, or about 8,500 euros. Okay? Great. So we completed that step. The last step we're going to do is verify where the total US dollar in the summary comes from. Okay, so sometimes you might be looking at someone else's spreadsheet, or you might be looking at your own spreadsheet, and you might just wonder, well, how did I get this number? How did I get this? And we can do something called tracing or auditing, just to sort of check where our formula is coming from. So we're going to look at that US dollar summary. And we see right here, okay, it's coming from cell C146. That's pretty simple. We could scroll down and look. Another simple thing to do, though, is if you go to the Formula tab in the top, you can do something over here, which is trace precedence. You can also trace dependence. So the first thing we'll do is trace precedence, and that will actually not only can we see here where it's referring to, but this is actually going to give us a line that shows us with a little arrow exactly where that number is coming from, which can be really helpful. You know, we remove that, but let's say something that's a little more complicated like this. If we trace the precedence, we can see, well, what did I highlight? Did I get everything I needed to? And sometimes those visual arrows can be very helpful with catching mistakes or figuring out a complex formula. Okay, so we finished all of our steps here. Hopefully you got the same answers we did. There are some additional exercises here if you're interested in using pivot tables. Otherwise, that completes this tutorial.